everyone. Welcome to this webinar on behalf of Business Station and the Australian Small Business Advisory Services Digital Solutions Program. My name is David Ashton. I'm Principal Consultant with Corporate Supremacy. We're going to be talking about the whole world of tendering for goods and services, for the supply of goods and services. So that's a bit about me and my experience and the services that I provide. The experience that I bring to this webinar in relation to tender writing is that I've worked on both sides of the fence. I've been a procurement manager where I've written packages and released to the market and sat on tender selection panels to award contracts and the like. So I've seen a lot of good tender submissions and a lot of bad ones. And then, of course, I've worked with clients and in my own business to write tenders to win work. In fact, yesterday I was advised that I've just been awarded a tender with a sizable state government agency here in WA, so I'm quite happy about that. So I have the experience I've won tenders, I've lost tenders, but I've got a broad experience in how the process all works, and that's what I'm going to bring to you today. That's a bit of information about Business Station. So we're in WA, Queensland and Northern Territory. I've been an advisor since 2014, delivering advisory services to a range of businesses of varying size across a range of issues, including tenders, grants and safety and the like. And I run these webinars every month. So the ASBAS Digital Solutions, it is going through a change, which I'll be sending you some information after this webinar. But that's just a bit about ASBAS. I'm also going to be sending you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, and you'll have access to the recording after the event as well. So you'll get a copy of this. Now, if you've got any questions as we go along, just drop them in the Q&A box and I will answer them, although I may be coming to the answer at some point in the presentation anyway. So in terms of what we're going to talk about today, just going to go through, what is tendering. I use tendering as a catch-all term, but there's some different terminology I'll run by you. Where you can find tender opportunities, the process of deciding whether to write a tender or not, and then preparing and finalising your submission. And then I'll look at, how tenders are assessed and the things that you need to be across to put in a complying tender, but then hopefully get you over the line to win one. And then I want to look at how you actually run your business, because they're questions that you're going to get from the tender panel. So we'll go through the whole lot, and at the end of it, you'll know how to find tenders, how to write them, and importantly, the strategy around tendering. So we'll go through all that. My slides are rather detailed. I deliberately do that because I want this to, as I said, I'm going to send this to you and sort of act as a bit of a handbook for you in the future, something to refer to when you're writing tenders in the future. So if we just look at, start with the presentation now, what is tendering? Well, it's a procurement process, the procurement of goods and services by a government or private industry organisation. It's a structured approach. It's formal. When I say structured, there is a process that they go through. The organisation prepares a document. It has a scope of works or specification. It has rules around the what information you to provide, when you're to provide that information. So it's very rules-based, very structured, and designed to ensure a greater pool of competition, and also for them to choose a supplier from, but also to ensure that all the suppliers' bids, prospective suppliers' bids are considered in a fair and open manner and in the same manner as well. So some terminology that you're likely to come across. As I said, I use the word tendering as a catch-all process, but expression of interest. It's a two-stage process. So it's really, first stage is about identifying prospective suppliers and pre-qualifying them. as suppliers for that organisation. And then once they've determined that, so they might go out to an EOI, they might get 20 responses. From that, they might say, well, you know, a dozen of these are suitable for our needs and meet the compliance and qualitative criteria. And then from that, they'll go to tender just to those ones that pre-qualify. Request for quote, small scale, dollar value, and small scale purchase. I mean, it could be, you know, ring up and get 3 quotes for something worth about $1,000. It could be something worth $100,000 that requires a little bit more rigour. It can be verbal or in writing, depend on the buying rules of that organisation. Request for tender, a large dollar value, may be publicly advertised depending on the dollar. I mean, state government tenders, generally anything over $250,000 have to be publicly advertised. Local government, anything over $150,000. That's just in WA. For those of you in Northern Territory and Queensland, have a look at the requirements there. But you'll generally find that, you know, tenders have to be publicly advertised, regardless of whether you're based in WA or elsewhere. I'm based in WA, so I have a lot of experience with local tendering for state and local government. With the tender, though, the scope of works or the specification is clearly defined, so they know what it is they want to buy. They outline that in the scope or specification, and then you're to submit your bid according to that scope. With a request for a proposal, the same procurement of varying dollar values, but the scope or specification is not clearly defined. So they know what they want to achieve, but they're looking for you to assist in, you know, putting forward a solution to that problem. So, you know, design and construct tender, for example, in construction, you know, they're looking for you to design the building, and they'll assess the proposal as well as your response to the overall tender as well. So just be mindful of those two situations there. So tender clearly defined, proposal not clearly defined. They're looking for a response to the solution to their problem. So that's just some terminology you'll come across: RFQ, RFP, EOI, and the like. So where can we find tender opportunities? So if we look at for, you know, digital platforms are the main one. Each state, local, federal government has a digital platform for you to be able to find tenders and download the documentation. So you need to, and I'm going to go through the various websites that you can access. So you need to register for those tender websites, and you can subscribe to an email alert, which brings up, you plug in the criteria that you're looking for in terms of tenders. So if you're a graphic design company, there might be a section there on design, you know, graphic design. You click on that, and then whenever a graphic design tender comes up, you would receive an email alert advising you about that, and then you go to the website and download the documentation. So with local governments, most of them use an outsourced portal for you to access the tenders. So you need to go and register with individual local governments. With state government, they've got and federal government, they've got a tender platform that you can access all agency tenders. I think it's important, though, you know, in terms of the strategy around tendering, to you know, build that relationship with prospective buyers first. So if you're looking at local government or a particular industry, you know, contact the organisation, ask to be put on the supplier panel to receive requests for quotes and that, remembering that not everything is publicly advertised, so they may just go to a request for quote to known organisations. So yeah, be mindful of that. Connect via social media platforms. And like, I've found tender and quote opportunities on Facebook and LinkedIn, like, so connect up that way, and just you know, contact their procurement team, ask if you can send through a brochure or something, and asked to be put on a supplier panel for any future supply opportunities. So where can we find tenders? We're in WA. Tenders WA is the main portal there for all state government agencies. You can see to the right there, I've got the home screen. All these sites are free of charge to register, free of charge to access the documentation and to upload your submission. So you don't need to make any payment to access these. Sorry, the Department of Finance manages most tenders for government agencies. Some government agencies have authority to manage their own, but the Department of Finance manages most tenders. That website there will tell you the ins and outs of how government undertakes procurement in Western Australia. Commonwealth Government, so AusTender is the main portal. So go and register free of charge. You can receive email alerts for planned procurement and those packages that have just been released to the market. So there's two platforms. One, the AusTender one is for general government procurement, and then there's the ICT portal as well for ICT procurement. So you can register for both of those depending on the industry that you're involved with. National projects of significance in the private industry, the gateway.icn.org.au website. Again, you can register for that and have your details recorded as a prospective supplier to industry. A lot of mining, construction, major national projects, major state government projects put on that portal. These other portals here, I have no relationship with them, but this is where you can also, most government in WA, most local governments use an organisation called TenderLink as their portal for you to access the tender documents. This is another one that's used, 360 providers. So you need to go and register for each individual local government that uses that platform. Likewise, a vendor panel is another one. Again, they'll send you email alerts when they come up, when tenders come up that meet your criteria. WA Local Government Association, you can register as a supplier. They sometimes manage tenders on behalf of local governments. And then this link here, Industry Link, Local Government Opportunities. You click on that and that'll bring up every council in Western Australia, and that'll take you to their particular tender portal. So it's actually a useful, one-page website that has all the councils listed. So in WA, also in the West Australian newspapers on Wednesdays and Saturdays, they advertise local government tenders that have to be publicly advertised. The Local Government Act requires all tender opportunities over a certain dollar value to 150,000 to be advertised in a newspaper circulating in the state. So most of them use the West Australian. And also a lot of construction companies advertise for subcontractors to supply pricing. So have a look on those in those papers. Also national and regional newspapers may advertise as well. But below there is an example of the types of adverts you'll see in WA. For those of you in Queensland, they're the websites for the state government tender opportunities. So there's a general tenders website and then one specifically for construction. As I said, identify the organisations that you want to work for, and then set about building that relationship with them. For those in the Northern Territory, that's the tender panel, tender website there for accessing Northern Territory government website tenders as well. So you can see there, you can register, across Australia. So, if you're in Perth or Queensland or Northern Territory, or WA, you can, and you're looking to tender in other states, you can register for all the state government tender websites, the federal government, just wherever you are doing business, you can register for those websites. So once you've registered for all those websites, you might get an email alert advising you that a tender has come up for your industry that you are interested in putting in a bid for. And this is where, you know, from your point of view, you go through the process. The first stage really is deciding whether you want to submit a tender or not. I mean, you'll see a heading there, you know, a generic heading. Okay, that might look interesting. The next stage then is to download the documentation from the website, and you can do that free of charge. And you know, that'll bring up all the documentation that the agency or organisation has released to assist you to prepare your tender bid. So, you know, the request document with the scope of works or specification, the buying rules, the questions that they want you to answer, the rules around the process of the tender, compliance requirements, all those sort of things, the contractual obligations, all those things will be released as part of that. You need to review that document in detail, or documents, depending on how many they release, and you need to understand, you know, what the scope or the specification requirements are. Yeah, so what is it they're actually looking to buy? You need to look at the criteria that you must meet. So there will be a selection criteria, and that's a component of, you know, a compliance and disclosure requirement, a selection criteria. So they're the questions that they're going to ask you, because what they're looking for is to engage an organisation that, you know, that agency can be comfortable that you can deliver what they want when they want it at a price that they're prepared to pay, and you yourself as an organisation are a credible organisation, a safe pair of hands to do business with. And that's what you need to convince them in your tender document, which we'll talk about. So yeah, the list of criteria that you must meet, so compliance, disclosure and qualitative and price criteria. The documents will have the instructions about the tender process, so, you know, the closing date and time, the information that you're to provide, the questions that you're to answer and the like, and then I'll have details about the buyer and what they are trying to achieve. So, you know, you can go and download any, you know, if you're looking to get an idea of what's, you know, the types of documentation they've seen, you can just go and download any tender document and have a look at that, even if it, and you'll get an idea of the tender requirements. Or alternatively, in WA, go and have a look at the Department of Finance website on procurement, and it'll give you the whole ins and outs of how government does procurement here in WA. So read that information in detail, because it's important for you to understand what it is they're wanting to buy and the type of organisation that they're looking to engage. And if you're not sure of anything, yeah, ask questions. There will be a contact person. You're allowed to ask questions of the tender, you know, seek clarification on the scope of works or anything that you're not sure of. That's important, because you need to be, you know, you need to have a clear understanding of the requirements, because that will determine, you know, the price that you submit. It'll determine how you respond to the tender. So if you're not sure of anything, get on the phone and ask the question. They may want you to put that in writing in an email, but yeah, certainly seek clarification on that. Now, as part of the buying rules, the tender rules, they may have a briefing session. So what this is, they'll generally get all the prospective respondents in the room, and they'll talk about in a meeting, and they'll talk about the tender. They might provide more information, or just, you know, go through the document to give an overview of what they're looking for. Again, it's part of the rules, so they might say it's a mandatory briefing session. If that's the case, then, you know, you must attend that meeting, and if you don't, then your bid won't be considered, because it'll be called a pre-qualification requirement. So you must attend a mandatory briefing session. If it states that it's non-mandatory, well, then it's optional. It's up to you. I would recommend that you attend these briefing sessions anyway. It gives you an opportunity to ask questions, seek clarification. You'll receive additional information. A lot of facilities type contracts, you know, cleaning or construction or maintenance, may require, more often than not, they require you to go on site as part of that briefing session. So if you're a cleaning company, you'll go and get an opportunity to have a look at the buildings that you're required to keep clean. That's quite common in cleaning tenders. And then the other advantage too is you'll get to see who your likely competitors are in the process. I mean, obviously they'll get to see you there, but you'll get an idea of the types of organisations that are going to put in a bid for that. And that gives you an opportunity to sort of assess your capacity against them. I mean, I've been to tender briefing sessions where I've looked at the tender and thought, well, I wouldn't mind putting in a bid for that. But I've gone to the briefing session, and then I sort of looked around the room and looked at some of my competitors, and I thought, well, I'm not probably really in a position to compete against them. So I've decided not to put in a bid. Alternatively, I've gone there and thought, yep, I'm going to have a go at this, and I've gone away and put in a bid. So it's part of your decision-making process as to whether you put a bid in or not. Briefing sessions are generally held early in the process. I mean, a tender opening period might be 4 weeks. The briefing session will generally be held in that first week. So importantly, analyse the competition. So who are you going to be competing with? Who is the existing supplier? Is it a completely new supply, or is it a contract that's coming to an end and the government just has to go out to tender? Get an idea of that, because that'll determine your bid as well. Understand who your competitors are, and the level that you need to be at in order to win. So if you're a smaller business, are you able to compete against some of the larger businesses in your industry? Look at collaboration opportunities. A small business may not be able to deliver everything to do with that tender, but if you can bring in other businesses as a joint venture to work with you on that tender, then that's a good way to win work. I mean, I've done that myself. I know there's tenders that I've put in a bid for that I've won because I've collaborated with other people. I mean, I've looked at consulting jobs, and I may have sort of 60% of the skill set that they're looking for and the experience. I'll go and find someone with that other 40% and put in a joint bid, and we've won the contract. So I've been able to win work through collaboration for jobs that I wouldn't get on my own. So have a look at those opportunities as well. And I mean, my relationship with Business Station, which is 7 years, came about as a result of me attending a briefing session. The old state government was bringing a program called Business Local, which is similar to the ASBAS program, providing advice and guidance to SMEs. I went to the briefing session because I was interested in putting a bid for it, looked around the room and thought, no, I can't compete with these big consulting companies. So I rang up Business Station, the CEO, who I met at the briefing session, and sort of said, would you be interested in me coming in as part of your team? And we met, and she agreed. And here I am 7 years later, still doing some work with Business Station. So you can see there that just thinking differently and looking for collaboration opportunities may bring you work that you wouldn't otherwise win on your own. So what do you need to win? What do you need to have to win the tender? Well, it's really these 4 points. Positioning. You need to understand the buyer, the opportunity in the marketplace. So who is the organisation that is looking to buy goods and services? So get an understanding of that. The government agency, the private industry organisation. What do they do? Who are they? Where are they positioned in the marketplace? Where are you positioned in the marketplace in relation to that? And what's the opportunity that you can access? They're looking for a solution. That organisation is going out to purchase goods and services. They're looking for a solution. You need to tell them how you can solve that problem for them. Compliance, so you need to tick all the boxes and supply all the information. So there is this is the rules-based nature of tendering. You do need to comply with the requirements of the tender and the rules to have your bid considered. So if the briefing session is mandatory, then that's a pre-qualification requirement. You must attend. If you don't, your bid is not going to be considered regardless of how good it is. So you must comply with all the rules of the tender. Persuasion, it's a marketing exercise. You're trying to convince me, when I'm on the tender selection panel, I've got your tender to read and, 20 others. Why should I give you the job? What's so special about your organisation? So you need to provide a compelling story to make me select you. And you need to make the document easy for me to read and find the information, which we'll talk about. And then the price. So you need to have, the government agency or organisation has a budget for this particular procurement. You need to, be within that budget range. Now, how do you find that out? Well, that would be, again, your research into the industry and understanding, the buyer, that positioning. Obviously, you have your own mechanisms for determining the price of your goods and services. But, try and do some research. I mean, local government can be a good one. I remember putting in a tender for a strategic plan consultancy with a council, and I was sort of thinking about what I should charge for this. So I went to that council's website and downloaded a copy of their budget, because the budgets are publicly available. And I saw a line item in the budget, strategic plan consultancy, $20,000. So of course my price was around that, $19,999. So just think a bit differently and do your research. And that, again, that's that positioning, understanding the buyer opportunity and marketplace. So relates to that. So you generally need all four to win the tender process. So be mindful of those 4 points. And then before you make a decision to submit a tender, ask yourself, are you tender ready? Look at the document, look at the questions that they're asking you, look at the information that they're wanting from you. Do you have those things? What do you, if you have gaps, then, you either decide not to put in the tender, or you try and plug those gaps before the closing date and time, so you can demonstrate that they've got that. So the next few slides, have a series of questions that you need to ask yourself in relation to your own organisation. And, they're sort of similar to the types of questions you're likely to get in the tender. So I won't read through all of them, but I'll just show you the screen. As I said, I'll be sending you a copy of this document. But go through that, maybe, take these questions yourself and as you're sort of doing your own assessment of your business, maybe just list some dot points under each one as to how you think you would be able to meet the requirements of these questions. And I think the more that you can do some pre-planning around, if you're looking at now tendering as one of your marketing strategies to win new work, I think, the more preparation you can do before you go for your first tender, the better. Developing, looking at other tender documents to see what sort of questions are asked, which I'll go through anyway. But, going through these questions and just sort of mapping out some answers to them, looking at your policies and procedures, case studies of work that you've done in the past, get CVs of your personnel, get your insurances in order, and the like. So the more pre-planning you can do, the better. So yeah, have a look at those questions, and as I said, work through them and just put together some brief answers just to give yourself an idea of where some gaps are in your business and in relation to tendering. So once you've gone through this exercise, you need to make a decision early in the process as to whether you want to put in a bid for this. So look at, things like your financial capacity to meet the project establishment or ramp up costs. So, it might be a slightly bigger project than what you're used to. You might need to bring on new staff or contractors to help you. You might need to purchase new plant and equipment. Do you have the financial capacity to do that? Do you have the resources and capacity to deliver the project over time? So, it could be a 3-year, it could be a contract to supply services over a 3-year period. Do you have the capacity to do that? Do you have the resources to do that? Is it consistent with your strategic direction? Yes, is it the type of tender that you really should, it's part of your strategy? Do you have the resources to complete the tender? So, you're going to have to take yourself out of the business for a week, possibly, to write the tender document and get all the information together. So, what's the impact on your day-to-day business? Or do you go to work during the day and then spend all night writing your tender? So, you might need to get someone in to help you do that. And do you meet the pre-qualification requirements? So that's the first thing that you should look at. Because, if it says a tender mandatory briefing session and you've got this tender late and you've missed it, well, there's no point putting in a bid. But, pre-qualification might require you to have a particular license or registration. So you need to make sure that you've got those licenses and registration, and make that decision to submit early in the piece. You might have a 4-week opening period. Don't leave it until the last week. You want to give yourself plenty of time to prepare your submission. So we've pressed go on that, and we're going to put in a submission for that tender. So the next section that we're going to go through is that process of you sitting down and writing your tender submission. So I see the tendering process as very much a project in itself. You've got a start and end date. So the start date is when you download that document. You might have, the tender opening period, 2, 3, 4 weeks or longer, depending on the scale of the tender. You've got a closing date and time. It must be delivered by, Friday, the 3rd of September at 2 o'clock. So, you've got to make sure you deliver it by that due date and time. So, treat it as a project. You've got writing, you've got to write the document, you've got to gather all your information, you've got to put together your pricing model. You might, if you're bringing in other people to work with you, you're going to have to get information from them. So be very methodical in the approach that you take, the strategy, the document design and presentation, the writing and collating of the information, call in subject matter experts, so, accountant, bid estimators, those sort of people that help you with your pricing, and, someone to write the document. Now, it could be you just doing all that, but again, be methodical, map out your opening period of when you need to get certain information. Don't leave it all to the last minute. So this next couple of slides, just, all the information that you're going to need, and maybe set up a tender file and keep all this information in the file, because you'll find with the tenders, they ask a lot of the same questions, particularly in relation to corporate details and some of this sort of corporate information that they're going to want. So, as I said, insurance, get all your insurances up to date, business name, registration details, referees, got any written testimonials, brochures and marketing literature. If you've got certification for your management systems, look at those, any licenses or permits. So again, just go through the tender, look at what the information they're seeking, and then get all that, and then develop some case studies for work similar that you've done in the past that's similar to that tender, because they're going to ask you to provide evidence of completing similar work, which we'll get to. So the tender is split into a number of sections in terms of your response. The first part is the corporate details, so who are you, your ABN and the like. Pre-qualification requirements, so if any, there may not be any pre-qualification requirements, but again, these are the things that you must have or do for you to have your tender assessed. As I said, licenses, qualifications, certifications, attendance at briefing sessions, mandatory briefing sessions, the compliance and disclosure criteria, generally yes, no answers to a series of questions. Are you prepared to accept the government contract? Are you prepared to accept the terms and conditions of the tender? Are you working in collaboration or as a joint venture with other parties? Those types of questions. The selection or the qualitative criteria. So that's really the nuts and bolts. That's the persuasion component. You'll have a series of questions around your organisational capacity to deliver the supply of goods and services. You need to be able to demonstrate in addressing this criteria that you can deliver what they want when they want it, that you're a safe pair of hands. And I'll go through some of the questions that you're likely to get a bit later on. And then the price criteria. So, you know, how much are you going to charge them? Yeah, they'll have a template that you need to fill out. You know, you've obviously, as I said earlier, you've got your own mechanism for determining your price. They don't necessarily need to see all your working documents to arrive at that price. They just want the final figure. Now, during that tender opening period, you know, they may get questions from other prospective bidders, or you may ask a question or seek clarification. They need to release the answers to those questions to everyone that's been identified as a prospective respondent. So the minute you download the tender documentation, your name and email goes into a database, and then you'll automatically receive any notifications during the course of that opening period that are released. So, you know, responses to questions, additional information, any clarifications and the like. So you need to read through those, because it may have an impact on how you answer your tender questions or how you determine your price. So, and in the tender document, you should acknowledge that you've received those addendum as well. So win themes, you know, in looking at, you know, again, this organisational capacity, why should I pick you? What's so special about your business? Yeah, what's that, you know, competitive advantage that you have over other businesses? As I said, why should I pick you? I'm reading 20 other tender submissions. What's so special about you that would make me pick you rather than the other ones? So you need to demonstrate your capacity to deliver the goods and services. So, you know, your expertise, skills, qualifications and experience of key personnel, you know, your organisational structure, how you run your business. So looking at your management systems, I mean, local government, you know, you might get questions on, you know, what's your quality management system? You know, how do you deliver your products and services? What's your methodology? I mean, that's all quality management. Safety and health. You know, in local government in WA, more often than not, you'll get a survey that you have to fill out that asks you all a series of questions around your safety and health management system. Risk management. Information security is becoming increasingly important. You know, how do you manage corporate information? How do you protect it? Your governance framework. You know, your codes of conduct, how you recruit and select staff. All these sorts of things. These are the types of questions that you're going to get, because they want to satisfy themselves that that you are a safe pair of hands to do work with. You're going to be able to deliver the contract requirements. If it's a 3-year contract, you're going to be able to stick it out. They don't want you going broke halfway through it. So again, you're demonstrating that you can deliver what they want when they want it, and that you're a safe pair of hands to do business with. So, and then, you know, in your response, demonstrate how your organisational capacity will contribute to, you know, effective and efficient service delivery, continuous improvement, you know, the day-to-day management of the contract, and any quality business outcomes that they're looking for as well. So presentation and structure. So again, the tender selection panel members are not just reading your document, they're reading however many tenders have been submitted. So make it easy for them to read. Set out your document structure, same logical sequence using the same headings. So look at the questions that they ask and use those questions as the headings to respond to. You know, simple, concise language, avoid waffle and repetition. Use persuasive techniques. So key messages articulated well. As I said, it's a marketing exercise. You need to convince me to give you the job. So don't just write page after page of text. You know, if you can separate it out with, you know, and answer the question using graphs or tables, photos, you know, subheading, short paragraphs, bullet points. Do that. again, have a nice, easy to read document, and avoid using vague or speculative language. So, believe, hope, expect. Don't write, I believe I can deliver this. Write, I can deliver this. Be very definitive in your language. Answer all the questions. If something's not applicable, write not applicable. Don't leave me guessing as to what the answer may be. And make it engaging enough for the assessor to want to read it in full. A bit like a book. You read the first couple of pages, you think, geez, I don't want to read this anymore. A bit like a tender submission. If you don't make it exciting and for me to read, then I'm not going to be too enthusiastic about having to read through it all. I'll get through it quickly and move on to the next one. So, so answer all the questions, provide all the information, have it well structured. Don't leave me guessing about anything. You may wish to include a cover letter, just a 1-page introduction, summarise your win themes, outline the structure of your submission so you can point me in the right direction to where the answers are, contact details, and have it signed by the most senior person there. And then look at proofread and edit. This is before the final stage of your thing. You've prepared the document, proofread and edit, strong win themes. You've answered all the questions. You've provided sufficient information for each question. It's logical and easy to read. It's internally consistent and technically correct. So you're not saying one thing on one page and contradicting yourself on another. If you need to include plans or diagrams, you're actually using you've included the correct versions. It's got all the information required. So as I said, answer every question and provide everything that they're asking for. One thing you might do is get a person that hasn't been involved in the process to have a read through the document before you submit it. Just do that independent review, and as if they were on a selection panel to really answer those questions. Having answered all the questions and that sort of thing. So that may be something you want to do as well. And then package and deliver by the due date. So don't put your bid in late because it won't be considered at all. In fact, with the internet uploads, 2 o'clock Friday, the internet will block all submissions. So get it in on time. Now, in terms of the process, they might have they might just go to the straight award of the contract, or alternatively, they may, the first stage will be a short list. And then they'll get the respective, those that they've determined to be on the shortlist in for a presentation or seek further information. So respond to any requests for further information in a timely manner. So you've submitted your tender document. It's over to someone like me now to do my part of the job, and that is to assess your bid. So that's what we're going to talk about now. How will tenders be assessed? So they're generally, the procurement manager will be the person that will open the tenders and then, record who's put in a bid and go through the compliance criteria and that. So all tenders are against, the selection criteria, an analysis of the strengths and weaknesses of each bid, whether you've understood the qualitative requirements and the scope of works, your capacity to meet the requirements of the tender, and ultimately the level of confidence that the tender panel has in your capacity to meet each requirement of the tender and to actually deliver the tender requirements. So the first stage is a compliance and disclosure. So, someone will go through the compliance part, make sure that you've met the pre-qualifications, you've accepted the conditions of, or you've met the conditions of participation. So, you've delivered it on time and answered all the questions and provided all the information. They may do an assessment of your financial security as a business. As I said, they don't want you going broke halfway through it. And, whether you've agreed to the contract or not, or whether you have any exclusions around that. These are generally a yes-no type of answer. where a no answer is given, provide an explanation as to why you answer no. You may not need to comply with every detail of every requirement. I guess a good example is insurance. The tender may require, say, 20 million public liability. You don't have 20 million public liability, you may only have 10. So in that situation, the question in the tender, do you have the required level of insurance? You would answer no to that because you don't. But then it gives you an opportunity to state that, if you are successful in the tender, that you will take out the required level of insurance. And I helped a business last week with a tender, and they didn't have the level of insurance required. But what I suggested to them was that, they have to answer no. And then we made a statement in the document that, if successful, we would take out the required level of insurance and provide a certificate of currency to that effect. But I also got them to get a letter from their insurance company to testify to the fact that they would be able to take out that additional insurance. So it just gave comfort to the buyer that they were able to take out that insurance. So it didn't leave the buyer guessing as to the requirement of that. So that may be something that you want to do as well. The next section is the selection or qualitative. So again, that's the nuts and bolts I mentioned. So the success of your tender will be determined by how well you address each of these criteria. You need to adhere to these requirements and meet all the criteria to increase your chance of winning. They may be weighted questions, so you might have 5 questions, and one's worth 10%, another worth 30%. And these are the questions that determine who wins the tender. So the way it works is that there might be, say, 3 people on the selection panel. Each person will be given a copy of all the tender submissions. They'll go away and read those individually. Point score the questions, and there's a criteria that you need to meet in order to get a particular score for a question. And then the panel at some point then will come together as a team and develop a team score. So, someone may have given a question 7 out of 10, another one may have given the response 8 out of 10. So they'll have a discussion as a group as to what the score should be, and then they'll determine the final scores, and then they'll rank the suppliers or the bidders from highest score to lowest, and then they'll take the highest score and then look at the price as to whether they're in the range. So this is that value for money concept that we talk about. So some of the questions that you're going to get in the selection criteria, capacity to deliver the goods and services. So that's looking at your management systems, how you run your business, your longevity in business, these sorts of things. Skills, qualifications and experience of your key personnel. History of completing similar projects or supply products. So this is where you can develop some case studies of work that you've done in the past that's similar to this request. So you can demonstrate that, as a win theme, our capacity to deliver this contract is demonstrated by our experience, our history of completing similar work. So outlining that case study, who the client was, what the nature of it was, and how you went about delivering that project. So the methodology to deliver the goods and services. So what's the process that you're going to adopt? Your quality management process from the time that you receive an order to the final stage of delivery. What's the step-by-step process you're going to go through? And then you need to demonstrate your understanding of the scope of works or specification. So and as I said, these are really the questions that you're going to get, or the types of questions, and this will do your capacity to answer them and provide good examples and good evidence of service and product delivery will determine whether you win or not. And then once we've determined that, then we'll look at the value for money assessment. Generally, the buyer will adopt the cheapest compliant decision. So when they say lowest price not necessarily accepted, that is true, but if they can get it and still satisfy themselves that you're a credible organisation, they will. But so will you if you're buying goods and services for your business. But you need to demonstrate how your price will deliver value for money in comparison to your overall quality of your bid and capacity and demonstrated capacity to deliver what they want when they want it. And, price basis is determined as, it could be a schedule of rates, lump sum, time payment, hourly rates, whatever. So again, the tender document will specify how the price is to be determined and reported. They may have a spreadsheet or something that you need to fill out, but it's important to present your price in the format that they want. So tenders may have a local content and regional price preference, so have a look at that. They may be subject to buy local policies, also subject to the free trade agreements that we have. So businesses in those countries would have the same capacity to tender for goods and services and be assessed on the same basis as an Australian supplier. In WA, anything over 20 million requires an industry participation strategy, so looking at employment and the like. There may be questions around whether you're an Aboriginal or disability service provider. So have a look at that as well. I know in WA, there's the government's got a policy, I think, of 4% of all procurement to be delivered to an Aboriginal registered business. So have a look at those things. But all things being equal, the company that can best able to deliver demonstrate best able to deliver the goods or services at the right price will win the tender. So after contract award, as I said, there might be that sort of final stage where they have a short list and bring that short list in to give a presentation, or they could just go straight to the award of the contract. You'll be advised in writing, sign the contract and get on with it. If you're unsuccessful, you may be advised who the successful supplier are. You can generally find that information on the government websites. If you go to Tenders WA, there's a section there on contracts awarded, and it'll tell you, who the contractor was and the price, of that. But importantly, whether you win or lose, seek feedback on your submission. This will help you, with other tenders that you write. It's always good to seek that feedback. Was it easy to read, structured well? Was your price within range? Those sort of questions. Just get an idea as to how you can improve upon your tender submission. Hopefully you win. But even if you win the tender, the one that I won the other day, I asked them what they think of my document. Did it read well and all those sort of things. It's always good to get that feedback just so you can make sure that if something's done well, that you continue doing it. If there can be improvements made, will you do that as well? So that's really the whole tender process from start to finish. So we've gone through the process of understanding what a tender is. We've found some websites that you can register for, so go and do that. We've gone through the whole process of making a decision whether you should put in a tender or not. The process of how to actually write your tender submission and make it easy for the selection panel to read and find information. We've looked at how tenders are assessed. Now, I sort of mentioned a number of times this organisational capacity, demonstrating your capacity to deliver what they want when they want it. So I just, the next few slides, I just sort of touch on, management systems. How do you actually manage your business? And sometimes tendering is a good opportunity to actually think about that, because you will get questions on how you actually do things. What is your approach to safety? What is your approach to environmental management? How do you, how do you manage corporate information to ensure security of it? So you need to have some, procedures in place to be able to answer these types of questions. So quality management, that's your process for delivering your goods and services to the market and ensuring customer satisfaction. Environmental management. I mean, if you're a construction company, how do you manage on-site waste, for example? A cleaning company, how do you manage chemicals? How do you dispose of chemicals? Do you just pour it down the drain, or do you dispose of it in the proper way? How does your business interact with the natural environment? You're going to get all sorts of weird and wonderful questions in a tender around how you actually manage your business. So as part of this pre-planning that I talked about, just start and document some procedures around these sort of things. They don't need to be voluminous documents, appropriate for the size of your business, but just start thinking about how you actually do these things. Do you have a safety management plan or a safety policy? How do you manage corporate and personal information, information security management? The tender that I worked on last week with a client, there was a question in there about their record keeping and document control. So they didn't have a procedure on that. So as part of the tender, we needed to look at how they actually do it. And then we documented that process and was able to include that in the tender submission. Good governance, codes of conduct, fraud and corruption control, corporate social responsibility. I mean, you might get a question there on, if you're awarded this contract, how is it going to benefit the social and economic environment of Western Australia or the state that you're in? So you need to have an answer for that. That's related to your corporate social responsibility. It's a contract in regional areas. How are you going to, are you going to engage local suppliers? Are you going to employ local people? Aboriginal employment is a key issue. Do you have an Aboriginal employment strategy? Do you have a reconciliation action plan? These are some of the questions that you may get in a tender. Risk management. So, I mean, I've had tenders where I've had to identify the risks in the supply and put together a risk management plan. Business continuity. This is important in terms of, as I talked about, this capacity to deliver what they want when they want it. You need to be able to demonstrate that no matter the circumstances, you're still able to deliver the contract. So what is your business continuity requirements? You're using plant and equipment in the delivery of the services for this tender. What happens if that plant and equipment breaks down? Is that going to delay the project? What's your backup arrangements? Do you have other equipment that you can bring on in short notice? What happens if you've got an employee on site working with that client and they don't show up that day for work? What's your backup arrangements? You're a cleaning company and the employee doesn't show up to clean the premises. Who does that? Is it that premises going to remain unclean for that day? So you need to demonstrate that no matter what the circumstances, your business can deliver to that client what they want when they want it. So business continuity is very important in demonstrating that you can do that. HR, so how you recruit, select, induct new employees and contractors. Your financial policies and procedures, so all your internal controls. As I said, they don't want you going broke halfway through a 3-year contract, so you need to demonstrate to them that you're financially sound. And that's a combination, you might get a letter, include a letter from your accountant attesting to that, or your bank manager, demonstrating that you are financially sound and secure. But not only that, that you've got good internal controls in place to protect your business and ensure solvency. So, as I said, protecting business information, very important component now. I know the state government procurement template has a clause in there, an information in relation to cyber liability insurance. So these are things that you might have to have in place. And that's some of the legislation that you'll come across. So in the tender that we worked on last week, we made reference to the fact, because it was a government tender, that the organisation that I was working with, the supplier, would be able to ensure proper record keeping in accordance with the State Records Act and the Freedom of Information Act. So state, local and federal government are subject to this type of legislation. So you need to, not necessarily across the detail, but at least have an understanding of what's required. So that's it for my presentation. Thanks for attending. We've gone a little bit over time, but as I said, I'll send you a copy of this. So just in summary, tendering's a great way to earn new business. As I said, I won a big contract yesterday, which I'm quite happy about. But the process of submitting your bid can be time and resource intensive. Should be one component of your business strategy. So, all the other things you do, networking, advertising, social media, keep doing that. Pick the right tenders that you think you can win and know you can deliver. So again, don't waste your time on every tender that comes up. Be strategic about it. Attend briefing sessions regardless of whether they're mandatory or not. Treat the writing of the tender, that as that process as a project, so that you can deliver, by the due date and time. You don't want to be rushing around on the last day trying to get all information. So try and aim to submit it a day before or something. Develop your win themes and reinforce these throughout the submission. Have in place robust management systems to demonstrate organisational capacity. And be particular about your presentation and structure. So as I said, make it easy for me to read as the selection panel member. Proofread and edit, and then importantly, deliver it by the due date and time. Otherwise, you've done a lot of work for nothing. So thanks for your attendance. I'll just that's my details. So if you've got any follow-up questions, give me a call. So thank you and good luck. And as I said, I'll send this information to you a bit later on today. Thank you for your attendance.